and welcome to Buffy and the Art of Story Season 7. If you love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and you love creating stories or just taking them apart to see how they work, you're at the right podcast. This time we're looking at Season 7, Episode 19, Empty Places, where Faith takes the potentials on a night out and no one but Buffy wants to attack Caleb again. I am Lisa M. Lilly, author of the Awakening Supernatural Thriller series and the Q.C. Davis crime novels, and the Writing as a Second Career books for writers. Along with the recap of Empty Places, today we'll talk about why an antagonist does not need to be a villain, how this episode in its first half strongly foreshadows later events and builds to a surprising climax, how Faith and Buffy's history affects the way Buffy sees that conflict at the climax and the choices she makes, what role grief plays in all the characters' actions and choices, and what Empty Places says about the theme of leadership. As always, there will be no spoilers except in the foreshadowing section at the end. Remember, if you'd like to get more Buffy and the Art of Story content and support the podcast, you can join the community at patreon.com/Lisa M. Lilly. That's patreon.com/LISA M as in Marie, LILLY. Okay, let's dive into the Hellmouth. Empty Places aired the first time on April 29, 2003. It was written by Drew Z. Greenberg and directed by James A. Contner. The opening conflict is fairly minor at first. Traffic is at a standstill. People are honking their horns. Stores are boarded up, and people walk past those idling cars carrying their belongings to get out of town. Buffy walks toward them, so she's going against traffic, but pauses when Clem calls out to her from the open window of his little red car. He sheepishly admits he is leaving town due to all the demonic activity and the apocalypse coming. You can't swing a cat without, and he cuts himself off and clarifies not that he swings cats or eats them. He's cutting way back. Cholesterol, morals. He tells Buffy the town has seen things like this before, but this time he doesn't think anybody's going to be able to stop it. But at a look from Buffy, he tells her he's sure she'll do fine and he'll come back if, no, when, she saves the world. But he adds maybe she should just get out of town this time. Buffy agrees she probably should. She's looked a bit downcast through all of this, and he tells her to take care. At about 3 minutes in, we go to the credits. On return, Willow and Giles are on a similar street, but they're talking to a police officer. He thinks they're with Interpol, but he keeps getting confused about that. Willow is doing a little mind control with magic, but it's taking a toll on her. Other cops go by them. They have a man in handcuffs who's raving about the apocalypse and From Beneath You. The police officer tells Willow and Giles that people are really acting up, so let the police know if they need help with their guy. They are just itching to hand out some justice. A bit of foreshadowing for Faith's later encounter with the police. The cop is not swayed when Willow points out that the guy who was being taken inside didn't seem like he was violent. The cop just asks again who they are, and Giles says he thinks they have what they need and they should go catch their flight to Interpol. As they leave, Willow says her control was fading, and Giles says the Hellmouth energy is affecting the cops too. And we see more of that because a couple other cops join the one who was talking to Willow and Giles. They have a flyer about a wanted fugitive that pictures Faith. The cops are very happy to hear she's come to their town. It looks like the situation calls for some justice. So pretty major foreshadowing here of how they're going to act toward Faith. Although the first time I watched the episode, I don't think I picked up on that all that much. At 5 minutes 43 seconds, Buffy is at the hospital. Xander's there in bed. He's got bandages over his eye. And she comes in and awkwardly, with a lot of pauses, tells him he might be able to go home that evening and some things about medication and side effects. Willow sits on the bed. There's a folder of materials that she and Giles got from the police on the hospital table. Xander's pretty muted, but he makes some jokes about expecting his other senses to improve 50% anytime now. Willow is surprised when Buffy grabs that file and is about to leave, and Willow says there were going to be card games. Buffy pauses and says she knows, but she should get back, get everyone started on this information. And she says, I think we're really close to something, looking at Xander, who says he understands. After Buffy leaves, Willow starts joking about the hospital jello, and they trade other puns about his eye. But she can't keep it up and looks so close to crying. And Xander just says, oh, Willow, please don't. And we cut to Anya. We're about 7 minutes in. Before this point, we typically would see the story spark or inciting incident that gets the main plot rolling. And it's hard to pick out an exact instant here, but I think that it is Buffy taking that folder of information and leaving. It starts Buffy's quest to deal with what happened at the vineyard and with her grief over Xander's loss by trying to find a way to turn the tide, to prevail over Caleb again, and to avoid dealing with her grief and her guilt over the loss of the potentials, the ones who got killed, the injuries to them, and Xander's lost eye. And I did go back and listen to the episode where Tiffany Nieheiser and I talked about grief in the Buffyverse. I loved her insights on this episode. I really encourage you to go back and listen again if you haven't. It is in the podcast feed between The Killer and Me and First Date. Tiffany pointed out something key, which is that throughout the series, when Buffy is grieving, she goes off alone, and she does that now. Yeah, she goes home where she's going to bring this information to the potentials and the others, but she is distancing herself from Willow and Xander, who really need her, at least for a little bit, to sit with them in their grief. At the Summers house, in the basement, Anya lectures the potentials. Andrew makes notes on his big board. She tells them she learned from her contacts that the Ubervamps, the Turricons, can be staked, but they have super strong sternums, so it's like driving a wooden stake through solid steel. But she says the potentials are all super strong, right? And one of them says, no. Anya's really awkward, but she continues telling them sunlight might work, but these things are not going out in the daytime anytime soon. Rona cuts her off, and Rona is the one whose arm was broken last week, and says she used to be really afraid of the Ubervamps, but now there's scary preacher guy. And Anya says they're working on getting information about him. And Amanda says, why bother? Nothing works. Nothing will. Anya acknowledges that they're upset and they'd rather be somewhere else, and says she would too, and she'd be at the hospital except for that breakup sex with Xander on the cot right behind the potentials, and the ones who are nearest to it scooch away from it. And she says the potentials still need to know this information, quote, we can't stop just because something else is trying to kill you too, end quote. Upstairs, Faith sits on the kitchen counter eating potato chips. Kennedy joins her and they joke about Kennedy playing hooky. Amanda enters too, and she wonders if there will be questions on the test about Anya's sex life. Faith says when Anya talks about getting all sweaty with Xander, Faith just reminds her that Faith had him first, and it shuts her right up. Kennedy says, what's the point when the preacher man's out there? Everyone feels pointless. They don't even have a place to start. Buffy enters at that moment with the file of research. They settle in the dining room, and Dawn keeps asking about Xander. Buffy tries to be upbeat, thinks he'll be coming home soon. Faith notices how upset Buffy seems, and turns the conversation to the file asking what Buffy learned. Buffy tells them it's information from the police database. She figured with Caleb's over religiosity and his violence, he wouldn't be quiet, and he didn't just turn up yesterday. So they looked for incidents of vandalism and violence in California religious institutions. Faith says it sounds like a place to start. When Dawn asks about Xander again and Buffy doesn't answer, Faith suggests she go work with Giles. This shows again that Faith has a lot more emotional intelligence than she did before, and she's really paying attention because she sees how tough this is for Buffy and tries to alter the situation. That adds to my view at the end that Faith does not do anything to actively undermine Buffy. She is really trying throughout this episode to support her. Kennedy and Amanda join them at the table, just as Buffy says they should look for anything they can find in the documents about Caleb, his church, his ring, and Kennedy says his ability to render a slayer useless in just one punch. Kennedy apologizes. Buffy looks really near tears, but she says it's fine and gets up and says she has something to do and isn't Anya doing a training for the potentials. They agree that they should go to that, and Buffy tells them not to worry, she'll be back soon, but it falls flat given what Kennedy just said. We know the girls don't feel that much safer with Buffy around. We're about 13 and a half minutes in. This is where we usually see that first major plot turn, if not sooner. That should come from outside the protagonist, spin the story in a new direction, and raise the stakes. And we do get that here in a few moments because Buffy goes to the high school. It's deserted. The lockers are hanging open. There's graffiti and trash everywhere. Buffy goes to her old desk and she picks up a photo of her, Willow, and Xander from season 1 or season 2, and they look so happy together. She runs her finger over it, and you could tell this is somewhere in the school that Buffy feels safe feeling those emotions that she has been holding back, except we hear Caleb's voice saying, "Oh no, look at this. Things don't go her way, and here come the waterworks, just like a woman," and the scene cuts to a commercial. So more viewing of Buffy, framing of Buffy from Caleb's point of view and how he sees not just her, but all women. On return from the commercial, Buffy stands, tells him to get out. He calls her a little girl. When Buffy reaches behind her for a weapon, he tells her not to do that. Fighting back didn't do much good last time, did it? And he asks how Xander is. Buffy tells him, "Come near Xander again and I will end you." He throws her desk aside, tells her to mind her manners. He knows she's frustrated, angry, and scared. He likes that in a girl. But she's part of history. Great things are happening at the school, at the Seal. She'll be part of it. Now why try to stop that? Buffy says, "I guess I'm just ornery." And she slugs him. He laughs and hits back. Soon she's on the ground, and then he lifts her by her neck, calls her a wild one, and says, "I'm going to take such sweet pleasure in taming you." He flings her through an interior window between her office and the hall. She flies through, hits the lockers, and is knocked out. As she's laying there on the tile unconscious, he says he'll see her soon, calling her little lady, and he leaves. In the kitchen at home, Dawn tells Giles about an abandoned monastery, while Andrew complains about Faith taking the last Hot Pocket despite his sign on it that it belongs to Andrew. They all go into the living room where the potentials are gathered, looking really dispirited and exhausted. Giles has Dawn look closely at the photos of the monastery, and she notes something she at first thinks is a knothole, and then she realizes why it matters. And it's interesting to see Giles kind of guiding Dawn. Buffy last time said stay with the girl who still need a teacher, and Giles is being something of a teacher to Dawn. He then tells Amanda to go get Spike. Faith walks in. Andrew glares at her because she is eating the last bite of that Hot Pocket. Spike enters, asks Rupert what's up, and Giles says he has a mission for him. And Spike responds, "Oh, really? Because, sometimes your missions end up with you trying to kill me. I'm not fond of those." But Giles shows Spike the photo, and Spike agrees it looks like Caleb's been there. He grabs his leather duster. Andrew starts complaining again about Hot Pockets, and Giles suggests Spike take Andrew with. Maybe Andrew's demon knowledge could be helpful. Neither Spike nor Andrew is terribly happy, but Giles is because they are both leaving. Dawn tells Amanda, "See, they'll have more information soon," but it doesn't seem to cheer up anybody. Faith says the girls need something to do in the meantime and then gets an idea for how to keep them occupied. The scene cuts to the Bronze. All of them are dancing. Faith is really enjoying it. She looks like her old self, not the homicidal one, but the one when she and Buffy initially bonded and were having a good time together slaying. Faith, at this point in the series, has really dealt with her emotional issues. She is in such a better place than Buffy, and we can see this partly because she is able to have a good time. Dawn is there having fun too, and by itself, I've got to say, this is not a bad idea. It's just that with the Hellmouth and the police and everything else going on, it turns out this is not a safe thing to do. Buffy returns home, is really surprised to see a deserted living room, but before she can ask where everyone is, Giles notices she's limping. She tells him Caleb was at the school, and yes, he can still make her see little birdies all around her head. But being unconscious for a while was restful. Giles is worried for her. It's a nice but brief moment of connection because then she asks about the police files and he tells her he sent Spike to check something out. Buffy says, "Is this a mission from which you expect Spike to return alive?" She's not that reassured when he tells her he sent Andrew along with Spike, and he says he did what he thought was right. Lots of subtext here because he's also talking about distracting her while Robin tried to kill Spike. He says Buffy was gone, someone had to make decisions, and Buffy says those are the decisions she worries about, and he sent away the one person who's been watching her back. Again, calling back to that earlier incident with Spike, making the subtext text. Giles says they're all watching her back, but Buffy tells him it doesn't feel like it. And she is also not pleased when he tells her the potentials are all at the Bronze. So now we're about 22 minutes, 30 seconds in. Normally around here or before, we would see that midpoint commitment by the protagonist or a major reversal or both. We don't have that quite yet, but we will get one. First, Caleb is talking to the First in the form of Buffy at the vineyard. Caleb is sure that Buffy got the message. She's so ready to walk the girls into danger. They just need to give her that one final nudge. And then the scene cuts to the Bronze. I said we weren't going to get the reversal yet, but you could see that conversation with Giles as a reversal, and it's not apparent that it is a major one, but that conversation about you sent away the person who had my back, Giles saying they're all watching her back, and Buffy saying it doesn't feel like it, will come back and play a role in the climax. So I am thinking that that is the major reversal, though Buffy doesn't necessarily recognize it. At the Bronze, Amanda raves about how cool Faith is, and she starts telling other people and giggling, and Faith asks how old she is, and Amanda says 17. Faith takes her drink and says, "Yeah, we're going to get you a real nice 7-Up." This is a lovely way to show that Faith is trying to watch out for the girls, but the cops show up. Faith jokes and flirts with them, trying to convince them to lighten up about this warrant for her arrest, but they grab her. She goes outside with them, probably wanting to get out of the way of the potentials, and once they're out, tells them she's not going back to jail and elbows one of them. Another one who stayed inside shuts the door to the bronze. One of the cops tells Faith, who said anything about jail, and they all draw their guns. We go to a commercial. Great hook before the commercial. Faith fights the cops outside. She does an excellent job at it. And inside, Dawn and some of the potentials face off with the remaining cop. Dawn tells the others they don't have to listen to him. He won't hurt them, and he proves them wrong by firing his rifle. I was going to say in the air, but it's basically only right above their heads, and a light fixture comes down. He tells them the best thing they can do is wait, but Kennedy knocks the rifle away from him. The others swarm him and get that door open. They join the fight with Faith. Buffy arrives as Faith knocks out the last cop still standing. He's unconscious. So all she knows or sees is that Faith led the potentials in a fight against the police. She asks, what is Faith doing? Faith tells her it started as just blowing off steam. Buffy tells the potentials to go home. I have a listener comment on Orpheus. Patron Melissa said, this was such a fun episode. I agree. The first time I saw it, I thought Willow seemed to suddenly be at a different spot in her arc, which was fun, but not in keeping with what was happening in her storyline, or so I thought. Now I have a different take. I can be having a crappy day and not know how I'm going to rise above it, but then I have a professional interaction, and after just a few moments of difficulty, I can put on that other Melissa, the one that is cheerful and caring of others and not completely in her own head. And a big part of what makes it possible is the context of a different person who perhaps expects that of me and with whom suddenly I can cast off broody, upset Melissa. We think we are a single person, but as Walt said, we contain multitudes. I love this. It really helped me get a different perspective on Willow as she appears in Angel. And that could be Willow being among people who don't know what she went through as Dark Willow and don't know what a challenge magic is for her now and are just expecting she can come in and do this spell. Maybe allows her to become that Willow who can say, yep, first spell I ever did, and just confidently go ahead with it. So I love that interpretation. I think it is very real to life. So thank you so much, Melissa, for that comment. If any of you would like to comment, email me at buffystorypod@gmail.com. Before we return to Empty Places, quick note for fans of cold case murder mysteries. My QC Davis crime novel, The Forgotten Man, is free on March 28 through March 31 on Kindle. If you are listening to this on the day it releases, or you're listening a couple days early because you're a patron and you get to do that, you can download your free copy right now. In The Forgotten Man, lawyer and private investigator Quill C. Davis at last looks into the murder of the sister who was killed before Quill was born. You can find links in the show notes or at lisalilly.com/forgotten man. That's all one word, Forgotten Man. Buffy's appalled that the girls were fighting and were drunk, and Faith says it seemed like a good idea at the time, and she is seeming a bit regretful or understanding that maybe that wasn't a wise decision. But the more Buffy berates her, the more she pushes back, and she points out no one got hurt. And Buffy barely knows these potentials. Maybe she should give them more credit. But Buffy is really angry and she's frightened for the girls, and she says she needs to know they'll be safe when she's not around. She starts to stalk off, and Faith calls after her and asks how safe they were at the vineyard. Rona or Amanda or Molly. Buffy slugs her and leaves. The scene cuts to Spike on his motorcycle. Andrew rides on the back, and he wants to stop and pick up road trip food like burgers. Spike tells him it's not a road trip, it's a covert operation, but Andrew thinks that could still call for food. He starts talking about curly fries, but Spike likes onion blossoms better, and Andrew agrees that he loves them too. How is it even possible? It's an onion and it's a blossom. And Spike says, well, you see, the genius of it is you soak it in ice water for an hour so it holds its shape. Then you deep fry it root side up for about 5 minutes. I love that Spike knows exactly how to make an onion blossom. And then he says, you tell anyone we had this conversation, I'll bite you. The scene cuts to Faith sitting outside on the Summers porch smoking a cigarette. Robin comes up the front walk. They introduce themselves. He comments on her bruises, and she tells him they are mostly from the cops, but one is from someone who just thinks she's a cop. Robin gets right away that was Buffy and asks if Faith will have to ice her or something. And Faith says, I'm not going to kill her. Wanted to, but didn't. And by the way, bully for me since no one else said it. She tells him it's a new thing she's trying, not killing. Robin says Buffy told him about Faith, and Faith responds, believe every word. I continue to love Faith's arc, and this shows she has retained all the growth from the episodes in Angel and from her time in prison. There's lots of awareness on her part of what she did to Buffy. She doesn't try to defend anything. She doesn't try to say it wasn't her fault. She acknowledges whatever Buffy said is true. Robin asks her why she didn't fight back when Buffy hit her, and Faith claims it's because other things matter more. But he tells her he reads people pretty well, and he thinks she's worried about Buffy. Faith tells him he needs to brush up on his Buffy-Faith history. And she observes that he walked there alone at night, an extreme sport in a town like Sunnydale. You might think he was out looking for a fight or something, and maybe he has bigger issues than what's wrong with B. She reads people too. A car pulls up and she ends with, Xander's here. Spike and Andrew enter the monastery. A robed man attacks. Spike's able to stop him pretty easily and sees Caleb's burn mark on the man's face. Last episode in Dirty Girls, I said that Caleb burned Shannon with the cigarette lighter. I'm pretty sure I said that. What he did was heat up his ring on the cigarette lighter and burn her with it so that it left a mark. So that's what they're referring to as Caleb's mark. The scene cuts back to the house. Xander comes in. There is a big welcome home banner and Dawn hugs him. Kennedy says, you have to pretend there's a big party here because they didn't have time to do a bunch of things and hang streamers and so forth. And Xander responds, that's fine. Parties in this house, I usually end up having to rebuild something. He sits, Willow is near him with Kennedy. The other potentials are gathered around. So almost all of them are on that side of the room with Xander. Buffy comes in. She's standing in the archway. There's a few potentials behind her, but just a few. She says, welcomes him home, says she wanted him to be there for this. She thinks he'll be interested in what she found. And then she tells all of them she knows that night wasn't fun, but she realizes now what they have to do. And she says, we're going back in. And we cut to a commercial. This fits with how people grieve. Buffy continues that effort to deal with her grief and probably her guilt over what happened to Xander and the potentials by trying to have sort of a do-over, go back in and do it right this time. But as we'll see, this is not going to work for the others. This moment of Buffy saying this also is the last major plot turn, what I think of as the 3/4 turn. It should grow from the midpoint, take the story in another new direction, and raise the stakes. Because I'm not as sure what the midpoint is, I don't know if this grows from the midpoint, but it definitely grows from everything that has come before, right? That need for Buffy to make up for what happened, but also they do need to deal with Caleb. It isn't like they can just ignore him. It takes things in a new direction, Buffy thinks, to take it to going back into the vineyard. Instead, it leads to things falling apart at the house. But it is Buffy being active, and that's really important. That third plot turn should be driven by the protagonist's actions. And it raises the stakes. Again, not how Buffy thinks. She thinks raises the stakes as, not that she's thinking of it that way, but the turn doesn't bring what she expects. And she knows she's asking a lot. She knows there is great danger, so high stakes. She doesn't realize the other danger, the bigger danger at this moment for her is that she is losing them. On return from the commercial, Spike questions the man. He looks like a priest. It's a monastery. I'm just going to call him a monk. And the monk is really shaky and scared, not so much of Spike, but of Caleb. He thinks they are with Caleb, but Spike reassures him that they have a common enemy. None of them are with Caleb. And Spike is pretty kind and low-key while Andrew tries to play bad cop. The priest says they can't fight Caleb, only run, but he does show Spike and Andrew a secret room inside the monastery. There is an ancient inscription carved into the stone wall there. It's in Latin. Caleb read it and got furious, and he burned his mark on the monk. The monk ran and hid, and he listened as Caleb killed the others. And Andrew says, running away saved your life. I love this line because Andrew seems to be both trying to comfort the monk, to tell him, yeah, it saved your life. You wouldn't be here otherwise, because you can see the monk feels really guilty about hiding. But he couldn't have stopped Caleb. He'd just be dead now. And Andrew might also be saying this to himself. He and Jonathan ran away. It saved Andrew's life. Ultimately, he killed Jonathan, so not so good for Jonathan, but it's like Andrew recognizing that as well. Maybe he is forgiving himself for running away. Spike translates the inscription. It is not for thee, it is for her alone to wield. The scene cuts back to Buffy. Buffy now tells the others about seeing Caleb at the school. Dawn is very worried that Buffy encountered Caleb again, but Buffy says she's fine. Better than fine. She figured something out. Caleb kept talking about the school, and Robin interrupts to ask if it's the seal again, and Willow asks if they need to try shutting it again. But Buffy says no, that's just it. They've spent all this time worrying about the seal, but if it's so important, why isn't Caleb there? Why isn't he guarding it? And she says the bad guys always go where the power is. Buffy makes a couple mistakes. She starts out by saying she found something, implying she learned something new and they have to go back. This sets up the idea that she's going to present some evidence, but she didn't find anything. She just figured something out. The group is not as willing to, as we'll see, go with her on this when there's really no new information. We as the audience know that there is a little new information that Spike now has, but Buffy doesn't have that now. So she sets herself up a little bit for not being able to prove up what she said. She didn't find anything new. That switch from I found something to I figured something out already puts her on a downward slide. I don't think that alone would have made the difference. The other mistake, and I'm not sure Buffy could do it any differently, is something Tiffany Nieheiser and I talked about in that episode, Grief in the Buffyverse, which is Buffy is not leaving any room for the others to grieve, especially her friends. Xander has just got home after losing the eye. Buffy didn't sit with him and Willow. Willow is grieving over this, and she is doing what she does, which first she went off alone, and then she wants to drive into action. And some of this is because she is the Slayer. She doesn't have the luxury of taking time to process her feelings before she fights the bad guys. At least generally she does not. And she isn't recognizing that the others need that to expect them to just jump on with her and want to go back is unrealistic and as we'll see, feels very reckless and cold-hearted to them. And this is very, very believable, both because of the differences in how Buffy processes grief, the way over the years she has cut herself off more and more, partly because losses are so hard for her. It weighs on her that these girls have gotten killed, will get killed because of her. And way back in season 2, she started to cut off from her friends because she realized they could get killed and she did not want to risk their lives. It has always been a struggle for Buffy. The other reason it's believable is Buffy's never had to lead in this way before. She was always the one and only Slayer. It was always going to be her decision what to do over that of her friends or even Giles, because she was the one who had to fight the fight. This is different because she has to persuade the others, and there is an alternative there, which is Faith, as we'll see. The others are looking doubtful as she speaks. They're looking down as Buffy says the First and Caleb are at the vineyard. They're protecting something, and she finishes, I say it's their power, and I say it's time we go in and take it away from them. And Faith says, or in the alternative, how about we don't? Buffy looks a little surprised, and Faith goes on that she's not going in there again, and Buffy shouldn't either, and neither should the potentials, not without more to go on. Faith is not standing with the potentials, but she's also not standing with Buffy. She's in a different space in the room toward the wall next to Robin. Lots of visual storytelling here. Buffy acknowledges that it won't be easy, and Robin cuts in and tells her Faith had the floor. Buffy looks shocked, and Faith tells her it's a theory, and maybe it works, and maybe it doesn't, but Faith isn't ready to play the odds, and Buffy asks, didn't she come here to fight? Faith responds that she did. They're all fighters, but they need something real to fight, not, and Giles says, windmills. And he is standing a little off to the side, kind of by himself, but much nearer to the potentials and Xander and Willow than to Buffy. Now Buffy is really shocked. Buffy says she doesn't know why they're all acting like they can't trust her. Giles points out that she basically said she couldn't trust them. I immediately thought, right, Giles, but you did try to kill Spike. There's a reason Buffy can't trust you. It's sort of a who started it thing, but I think that's fair. At the same time, if we take Giles as he is in season 7, and I have trouble with season 7 Giles, as I said in my Patreon bonus episode, Will the Real Giles Please Stand Up? But if we accept that this is Giles for this season, this is a good setup for him not standing with Buffy, and the seeds were sown in that conversation when Buffy said she did not feel like they had her back. Buffy asks him if he sent Spike away so he could ambush her here, and Rona says she's sick of hearing about this Spike guy. And that fits with way back when the First was pretending to be Eve, one of the potentials, and started sowing the seeds of doubts about why was Buffy protecting Spike? Wasn't he just killing people? Why did Buffy keep him around? Rona goes on now about Buffy being reckless and so obsessed with beating Caleb that she'll jump into any plan without thinking. I don't think it's that Buffy's obsessed with beating Caleb, but I do see her as jumping in because of those emotions that she is not able to deal with. And because this is her way, she goes in and she fights. Kennedy joins in and reminds Buffy that people are dying. Willow starts to speak. Kennedy spins around and demands to know why Willow's always standing up for Buffy, and Willow says, I'm not. Buffy can hardly believe it. But Willow says with all that's happened, she's worried about Buffy's judgment. And I like that Willow is speaking from concern, and there were seeds of this at the hospital. Willow's expression when Buffy grabbed that file and left without sitting with them at all, she saw how Buffy was, and she probably picked up on how difficult it was for Buffy to tell Xander what the doctors and nurses had said, and she probably sees that as Buffy not grasping what's really happening or not getting it, rather than seeing it as this is how Buffy deals with grief. But even if she thought this is how Buffy deals with grief, she could still think, and that is affecting her judgment. Buffy tells them she wishes it could be a democracy, but it's not. They need a single voice, someone to make the hard decisions, to lead them. And now Anya comments that why is it automatically Buffy? And says, you really do think you're better than we are? And Buffy says, no, and Anya responds, but we don't know. We don't know if you're actually better. I mean, you came into the world with certain advantages, sure. I mean, that's the legacy. And Buffy says, and Anya says, but you didn't earn it. You didn't work for it. You've never had anybody come up to you and say that you deserve these things more than anyone else. They were just handed to you. So that doesn't make you better than us. It makes you luckier than us. I had a really hard time with this speech as well. There is some truth in it in the sense that Buffy did not choose to be the Slayer. There's nothing suggesting that the girl who is the Slayer at any particular time is the most morally upright person or somehow earned it. But Anya's speech discards everything Buffy has done. Faith is standing right there. We can see that just being the Slayer is really hard and that some Slayers make really poor choices. Yes, Faith reformed, but she killed a lot of people and did a lot of damage and tortured Wesley, just to name a few things. So it isn't as if Buffy has not overcome many hurdles and has not earned some amount of respect from the others. She did work for it, and she could have been someone who didn't work for it. She probably wouldn't have lasted this long. So no, she didn't earn being the Slayer, but being the Slayer for that many years, stopping as many apocalypses as she did, protecting her friends and family and the town as well as she has, and saving the world, that was a lot of hard work and sacrifice and willingness to die for it. I guess we are supposed to see Anya as being bitter. Probably it comes from Buffy literally killing Anya last season. And a few times Anya has said things on why Buffy holds some people accountable and not others, like why does Spike get a pass? And then she'll recollect, oh yeah, she did slaughter a fraternity house full of college boys. So there's always been a bit of Anya kind of complaining that Buffy holds her to account. But I do struggle with, normally Anya is our truth teller, and there is a lot in there that is very unfair to Buffy. I actually feel like it would be a stronger scene if Anya was entirely telling the truth. Thank you to everyone who rated or reviewed the podcast, told a friend about it, or shared it on social media. That helps other Buffy fans find it. So last time I talked about Dirty Girls, and I had not realized there was a DVD commentary for the episode with writer Drew Goddard and actor Nicholas Brendan, who plays Xander. One of the things Drew Goddard said was that the writers aimed to make Dirty Girls about the male gaze, and that is why they started with Xander's fantasy, which makes me feel a whole lot better about them including that in the episode. Though it wasn't terrible because they definitely poked some fun at it as well. Drew said that they were trying to say something specific about the male gaze, and he said something about, we'll see at the end of the episode whether we've done it, but then he never came back around to that in the commentary. So we don't get a chance to hear what it is the writers were trying to do and see if it succeeded. It fits in, though, with that note I made about Spike being in bed, and it looks like maybe he's naked. We definitely see him shirtless. And I had noticed as well that we started with Xander in bed. So we have these two men in bed talking to women. And then Andrew is also telling these stories and giving us this framing of faith, which is something Drew Goddard mentioned as well. And of course, we have all Caleb's take on women and misogyny, which we see more of this episode. And I didn't quite catch on that was purposeful, that they were showing these different male points of view, which makes me think whatever they were trying to do, at least I needed a little bit more to catch on to it. though it certainly could have still worked at a kind of subliminal level. Drew Goddard also said that a lot of what fascinated him about Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a series was that Buffy was a hero who made mistakes. Now that he said that, that is such a big draw for Buffy from the beginning. She sometimes rushes in when she shouldn't. She cuts people off when she needs their help. She does make mistakes, and she does her best to learn from them. Though, like all of us, she still comes back around to doing the same things at times. He mentioned that in Dirty Girls, we see that with going in at the vineyard. It's a mistake, and anyone can make a mistake, even if they are really good at something or really skilled in it. And in that instance, I feel like it was a really reasonable thing for Buffy to do, but it had disastrous consequences. Now in Empty Places, we see her trying to go back in, and it looks like she is about to make the same mistake. And it is a great point that that is part of what keeps her so interesting as a character and keeps the show interesting. And it demonstrates that a protagonist does not need to be, and in fact, really shouldn't be perfect. Goddard also commented that Xander is the one who keeps the house together, that's part of why during season 7, they literally have him say that a number of times. I'm just trying to keep this house together or put this house back together. And they thought of him as the one throughout the 7 seasons who is helping keep things together on an emotional level, who is there for Buffy in that way. And that is why when they needed to show a loss, it happened to Xander. And they thought about killing Xander, but they didn't, because they felt like no matter what the outcome of any battle was, if they wanted to preserve the chance of Buffy having a win at the end, it really couldn't be a win if Xander was dead. And Nick Burndon pointed out, too, that they had already dealt with Joyce's death in the body. It was a whole episode about the death of someone Buffy loved. And so what do you say about it again after that? And he said that was one of his favorite episodes. Finally, I mentioned something last time about Caleb and religion and using that character, potentially that the writers could have been using the character to comment on some of the negative aspects of religion. And Drew Goddard said that they purposely were very clear that Caleb was not part of any church, that he rejected the church or the church kicked him out, I think both. So they did not mean for him to be evil because of religion or an evil representative of religion. I did something like this in my Awakening series. There is a religious order, so it is religious, the Brotherhood of Andrew, but it is very specifically not any one religion. They do have Christian beliefs, but I'm very clear throughout that they're not a specific established church, that they would be considered very fringe, and that the people in it are not meant to be, here's what religious people are like. And there are other people in the series who are religious, who are on the side of good. So it is not about, oh, religion is bad. It's about this particular type of fanaticism and these particular types of beliefs in my supernatural thriller series that are problematic. So I just said that Anya's whole speech wasn't true, but I suppose in a larger sense, it is in that Buffy has not formulated why she should lead other than that she's the Slayer, as is going to become apparent, and that's something she needs to deal with. We are moving into the climax of the episode. You could really see it as starting anywhere in this confrontation. That's where the opposing forces have their final clash and resolve the main plot conflict. And Buffy, in response to Anya, says she got them this far. And Xander says, but not without a price. And he goes on that he's trying to see her point, but it might be to his left, which it's his left eye that he lost, and he just doesn't. I can more or less buy this from Xander. I wish he had added something like, because rushing back right now doesn't make sense. I feel like that's the thing that is not being said that is frustrating. I want to know, it's not that Xander disagrees with Buffy leading, or now that he's the one who got hurt instead of someone else, he suddenly changed his whole mind about Buffy. I'd like it to be more him saying, I'm trying to see your point, but you want to rush back in with no plan for anything being any different. As it is, though, because he doesn't say that part, it really does feel too much to me like, hey, I was all in for you when it was other people like my friend Jesse way back in the pilot who got killed, or other people along the way, or when Dawn's life was in danger. But now that I lost an eye, I'm not on your side anymore. Buffy tells them she'll talk strategy, but this is the plan. They need to be together or it will fall apart. Giles rightly points out that they're clearly demonstrating that they are not together. Buffy tells them she's still in charge, but when Rona asks why, she falters and says because she's the Slayer. So this is where Anya is partly right. And Rona asks, isn't Faith a Slayer too? And now Faith is a little shocked. She tells them she's not who they want. She's not, quote, in charge chick, end quote. She just thinks Buffy needs to take a beat, rethink things, but Kennedy suggests a vote. Now Buffy gets mad and she says she didn't know this was a popularity contest. She should have her chance to bake them cookies, braid their hair, and Faith says, learn their names. And this is part of that leadership theme in the episode, because Buffy really doesn't get leadership, and some of leadership is a popularity context for people to follow someone, to choose them as a leader. They don't have to like them in the sense of they don't have to be like, hey, that's a really nice person, or that's someone I want to hang out with, though that can help. But they do have to be popular in the sense that people feel that the leader understands them. And that is where Buffy has not been able to hit that mark. And she's thinking it's, oh, well, Faith took him out drinking and that's why they'll vote for her. And what she's missing is Faith related to them as people, because Faith isn't so afraid about losing them. Faith doesn't have those same feelings that Buffy has. So she has learned their names in a day or 2 days where Buffy still struggles, because Buffy cannot face that loss. The closer she gets to them, the harder the loss is, and the harder it is for her to make decisions knowing these girls could get killed. Faith, probably because she has been through so much in terms of things she feels guilty for, is more able to accept that, yeah, she will get to know these potentials and some of them will die and she will have to deal with that and there will be guilt. But she spent a lot of time in prison processing her feelings, dealing with guilt. She did more of it in the episodes on Angel, and Buffy has never had the chance to do that. Her life has been one constant, almost constant battle after another. So she isn't connecting, and they do not feel like she understands them or that she has their best interests at heart. And there's some irony there, because Buffy is probably more concerned about protecting them than Faith is, because Faith is more realistic and she doesn't want them to get killed, but she could probably deal with it easier than Buffy. More irony, that might make her better suited to be a leader. Now, Buffy half laughs and says Faith must be loving this, coming in to take everything Buffy has. She did it before, and she asks if Faith told the potentials how she used to kill for fun. Isn't that nifty? And this is where the Faith-Buffy history alluded to earlier plays in here. Faith has been able to get past it, which, to be fair to Buffy, is partly because Faith is mainly the one who did really terrible things to Buffy, not the other way around. But nonetheless, she is able to set it aside and see more clearly what's going on and what different people's emotional needs are. Buffy is not. It is really hard for her to consider that Faith might have a point. And we got in the previous episode that Faith has been in Angel's head. Faith was palling around with Spike. Like, once again, here is Faith taking over what matters to Buffy. And now it is these potentials. And Buffy did not see what happened in Angel, which is where the audience members who watched the Angel episodes, again, no more than Buffy, they have really seen that Faith genuinely and truly changed. But Buffy, she does not know that. She did not see it. Finally, it's because we all revert when we're scared or stressed. We lose whatever gains we have made. Often we do emotional gains or relationship repair. And here, while she and Faith reached an okay place in the last episode, under this stress and this feeling of betrayal, Buffy goes right back to that. Faith, though, holds steady. She is pretty emotionally healthy, and she doesn't get drawn into a conversation of the past. She knows she was wrong then, but that is not the point now. So she just says she didn't come here to take anything away from Buffy, but she's not going to be Buffy's lapdog either. She came to do the right thing, however it works. She doesn't know if she can lead. Quote, but the real question is, can you follow? End quote. An echo of last episode when Caleb talked about following. This is something I did not notice at all on any previous watches, but it is significant. Can you follow? And the question is following the right thing here? Part of what Buffy may be struggling with is she doesn't just want to be a leader and have people follow, because she tells Robin she does something and these girls die, but she also doesn't know what else to do. There's not another model for it. And Robin now says, so we vote. Buffy says, what? And she looks stricken. I feel like this is the first time it hits her that this is real. This isn't an argument that is going to resolve and they are going to go with her. It is really a crisis of faith in her, a real moment of reckoning. And then she says she can't watch them throw everything away, knowing she's right. She can't stay and watch Faith lead them into a disaster. And Dawn says, then you can't stay here. She goes on that she loves Buffy, but Buffy was right. They need to be together. Buffy is not with them, so she's sorry, but it's Dawn's house too. So Xander, I can almost buy. I really just can't quite grasp Dawn saying this. I feel like the writers need this to happen because at the end, Buffy needs to go off on her own, and the story would have none of the power if it's Buffy and Dawn going off alone. You lose so much, but it is really difficult because there is just nothing I can see that makes Dawn say this to Buffy. If you have seen things that you think support this, please, please, please write in and tell me, because maybe I am missing something. I could see Dawn, like Willow, questioning whether Buffy is using her best judgment here, being on the side of Buffy, don't take them in to the vineyard again. But just that, like, you have to leave. I guess you can't have Faith throw her out because it's pretty clear Faith is not doing any of this just to oppose Buffy. Dawn is really the only one who can say those words that push Buffy out. I buy that Buffy could leave, and she kind of looks at Dawn, and Dawn's like, I'm staying here. You know, it's my house too. But I had trouble with that. Buffy does grab her coat and leave, and that is the end of the climax. So every climax ends with the protagonist either winning, losing, having a Pyrrhic victory where they win at an unbearable cost. You could have a partial win, partial loss, but the most dramatic are those first three. And this is 2 out-and-out losses for Buffy, the vineyard, and this, where she leaves. Now we're in the falling action, which is very short. This is where the writers tie up loose ends, resolve subplots, and Rona says, ding dong, the witch is dead, and Dawn says, shut your mouth. So we know that Dawn, it's not that she was mad at Buffy, it's not that she doesn't care about Buffy anymore. She just apparently thinks Buffy is making the wrong decision. Faith follows Buffy out onto the porch, and we get this really heartbreaking exchange. Faith says, hey, look, I swear I didn't want it to go this way. And Buffy, she has her back to Faith and she says, don't. And we think she's saying, like, don't tell me that. Faith says, I mean it. And there's a tear coming down Buffy's face. And she says, still with her back to Faith, don't be afraid to lead them. Whether you wanted it or not, their lives are yours. It's only going to get harder. Protect them, but lead them. Buffy turns. She and Faith make eye contact. It's kind of a passing of the torch. Faith nods and goes inside, and Buffy walks down the stairs in the dark, alone. That ends the episode. And this moment makes everything that doesn't work for me in the episode not matter, because it is so powerful. And I love that in that moment, Buffy does let go of her resentment toward Faith, and what she cares about is these girls. And even as they have pushed her out, she is telling Faith, yeah, it's going to be hard. And you need to do this. You need to protect them and you need to lead them. Going back to the climax, who was the antagonist here? I said our opposing forces. Usually our antagonist is one person. Here, I think it is essentially everybody. Yeah, Caleb and the First, but they're almost background in this. This is Buffy versus her friends, the potentials, Giles, Faith, basically Buffy versus society. And the reason it works so well is that, with that exception of my not quite buying Dawn and having a little bit of trouble with Xander, everybody has very strong reasons to push against Buffy, and they push very, very hard against her. That is the way to make society as an antagonist work. You have got to have people who speak for society. And in this case, it's a very specific society of the potentials, of the slayers, of the people aligned on that side who now are opposite Buffy. This shows, too, an antagonist does not have to be a villain or be evil. Caleb and the First are, but the others clearly are not. These are all people who really are still on the same side. They just differ drastically in how to go forward, how to fight evil, how to accomplish their goals. And we see this all the time in real life, right? Just because you share a common goal or a common value does not mean you are going to agree on how to go about that. And I think sometimes those can be the deepest, most challenging, and most damaging conflicts, because there is that sense of, wait, why don't you see it this way, right? We can grasp why someone who has a totally different take on something or totally different values, we can grasp why that person might strongly disagree with us and take very different actions. It's so much harder and feels so much more personal when it's someone who shares a value, who's a friend or a family member, has such a different take on what should be done. So this is a very powerful climax because of that, and because of the excellent characterization work done throughout it and the foreshadowing. So speaking of foreshadowing, that is it for this episode, other than foreshadowing for the rest of the season. If you are not sticking around for that, thank you so much for listening. Come back next time for Touched, Season 7, Episode 20, where Faith takes over as leader, Spike encourages Buffy, and disaster looms. And we are back for foreshadowing, which does include spoilers. Xander's eye jokes will come back in a future episode. He makes 2 or 3 of them when he is out talking to Dawn near the car, and he chloroforms her when she is laughing about him being a cyclops. He chloroforms her at Buffy's instructions, so he doesn't do it because he's mad about the jokes. But it's interesting to me that we started seeing them here. On a more serious note, Caleb telling the First he's sure Buffy's got the message, talking about her being so ready to walk the girls into danger, does foreshadow when next time Faith rather than Buffy, will bring the girls into danger. And we find out that is what Caleb's aim was. So Buffy was absolutely right. Caleb was saying all these things about the school and the seal, but that's not where he is, or the first is, or most of the bringers are. It's at the vineyard. But he did that to plant this seed with Buffy so that she would then get the girls to follow her to the arsenal and to the bomb that he hopes will destroy them all. This is part of why I think that continued use of the word follow is so important, because following in these episodes is really dangerous. And you could argue that had Buffy been able to go forward with her plan of going back into the vineyard right now and the girls followed her there, it might have been disastrous for them too. They wouldn't have all gotten blown up at once, but it isn't clear that Buffy could have done better right at this moment. She does really well when she goes back alone and she's able to evade Caleb and get at that scythe. But if the potentials were with her, could she have done as well? It's not clear. So following is definitely not a positive thing in these contexts. Spike's translation, of course, about it's not for thee, it's for her alone to wield, is about the scythe. We'll find out that Caleb cannot get it out of that rock. He thinks he will get it out by brute force and technology. They're using power tools on it, but Buffy just walks up and just lifts it right out. So it is for her alone. Buffy's comment about wishing it could be a democracy, but it's not, they need a single voice, foreshadows next week when the first scene is the potentials, or maybe the second scene is the potentials sitting around arguing about how to argue, talking about how do they even do this, all wanting to have a voice in things. And Faith basically telling them, hey, I'm your leader now. It's not a democracy. Buffy is right. And a democracy would not work in that particular instance. So there is some irony there, because at least Kennedy is voting for Faith, thinking that now Kennedy's going to have a voice in things. And she does have a little more input, as it turns out, than with Buffy, perhaps. But now it is Faith leading them instead. There's always more to say, but I will end the episode here. Thank you again for listening, and a special thank you to the patrons who support the podcast and keep me motivated to continue it. Come back in 2 weeks for Season 7, Episode 20, Touched, where Faith takes over as leader, Spike goes out to find Buffy, and disaster looms. You can find back Buffy and the Art of Story episodes, as well as the Buffy and the Art of Story books and all my fiction and nonfiction at lisalilly.com. For more Buffy and the Art of Story content, early releases of regular podcast episodes, and access to my course, How to Plot Your Novel from Idea to First Draft, join the Patreon community at patreon.com/LisaMLilly. Music for this episode was written and performed by Robert Newcastle. Buffy and the Art of Story is a production of Spiny Woman, LLC, copyright 2025. All rights reserved.